Let's look at how to do some basic edits. Start out and make sure that you are on the edit page. You can see that I'm using the list view. This would work the same if you were in the thumbnail view. We have a series of shots here, stand-up number 1 through stand-up number 7. This is going to form the basis of our project. So I'm going to start with stand-up number 1, and all I need to do is double-click on it, and that file will open up in this preview window. Now here at the bottom of the preview window, you can see I have some controls for playing forwards and backwards, jumping to either end. And if I just hit play, I'll be able to watch Scott in the kitchen.
Okay. Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be talking.
Going to pause that there. There's a little bit of dead space at the beginning where he pauses and he says, okay. I don't want any of that, so I'm going to find a moment right after he finishes messing around, right before he actually starts talking. And I'm going to assign that an end point. This will be the moment that the video actually begins. I can do this a couple of ways. Using my play controls. Now on the keyboard, these three controls, backwards, stop, and forwards, are the keys J, K, and L. J plays backwards, K pauses, L plays forwards. So if I press L.
Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen.
And if I press
Today
K.
we'll be talking about.
The nice thing about using J and L is if I tap them repeatedly, I can watch in fast forward or fast rewind.
About how to make the perfect cup of cappuccino.
I can also, if I'm looking for a specific point, use the left or right arrows on my keyboard to move one frame at a time. I probably don't need to be that precise with this, so I'm going to find. So right here, he's about to turn to the camera and say hello. This is where I want the clip to begin. So I'm going to set an end point here. And I can either do that by pressing the letter I on my keyboard or by clicking this end point marker here, mark end button on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand corner of the preview window. And you'll notice, let me move the playhead to the right a little bit.
And welcome.
You'll notice this little dot has appeared. That marks my endpoint. I can actually click and drag that. I can move the endpoint with the mouse once I've put it in place. Now I'm going to find the end of this clip.
And cut.
I don't need to hear him say and cut, so I'm going to back up just a little bit.
And a dark roast.
So right there where he sets it down, that'll do for now. I can mark an out point either by hitting the letter O on my keyboard, or I can click this Mark Out button, again in the bottom right-hand corner of the preview window. Okay, so now I've set an end point and an out point. When I make my edit, only the content between these two dots will be transferred. So the beginning where he messes up and the ending where he says end cut will not be part of my project. There's more than one way to do this. I'll show you the way I prefer, and then I'll come back and show you a couple of other ways to do the same thing. What I like to do is simply to click and drag. So I'm just going to put my mouse somewhere in the middle of this image, and I'm going to click and pull it down to the bottom of the screen. This is the area called the timeline. And you'll see that as I click and drag, I get an outline image of the video clip, and I can position it wherever I want on the timeline. So here we go. Click and hold with the left button. You see that as soon as I start to drag, I have a thumbnail of the video clip. When I bring it down here onto the timeline, as I get close to the middle of it, this little film strip view appears, and I can slide this anywhere I want, left or right. I'm going to start it at the very beginning of the timeline, and then turn it loose. Now, a series of things have happened, and let's take a quick look at what we can see. the left-hand area of this timeline has changed from what it looked like a moment ago. There is information here that wasn't there before, and we will be working with that as we progress through Resolve. This right-hand window suddenly has video in it. That wasn't there a minute ago. That was just an empty window. So as we look at what has happened on the timeline here, as we look at what happened in this right-hand window, this program window, we see that it has the same controls underneath it that the preview window had. And if I were to press play,
Hello, I'm Scott and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'll be talking about how to
we can see that not only is it playing in this window, and this little playhead is moving here, but also the playhead on the timeline is moving. Likewise, if I were to click and drag this timeline playhead, you would see that the video in this right-hand window is changing. Let me go ahead and show you that. So the timeline and the program window are both showing you your edited piece, just in a different way. This program window is actually showing you the video and playing the audio, whereas the timeline is showing you a graphic representation. Let's go ahead and do a second clip. So I'm going to come over here just like I did before. I'm going to double click Stand Up 2. And again, I'm just looking to set an in point and an out point on this new clip in the preview window. So I'm going to play a little bit.
So now that we've got our 3 roasts here, how do we know which?
I don't really need to worry about an end point on this one. The beginning is very clean. So I'm going to jump to the end.
And cut.
So he does indeed say and cut at the end. We don't want that. So I'm going to wait until he stops talking.
We can tell that this one's probably been around for a while.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and make my out point there. I might need to trim it a little bit later, but that's okay. I can do that. It doesn't need to be perfect. So I didn't mark an in point, but I will go ahead and mark an out point. And notice that it selected the entirety of the clip before the out point. And just like I did before, I'm going to click in this window and drag it to the timeline and put it right after my first clip. There we go. Here's my clip number 1, which is called Stand Up 1. Here's my clip number 2, which is called Stand Up 2. And they're strung together. And if I play across them,
And a dark roast.
watching in the program window here, you'll see there's a jump cut,
So now that we've got our 3 roasts here,
and my video continues. So I'm just going to work my way through each of these stand-ups one at a time, marking an in point and an out point, and dragging it down to the timeline.
so
This one's fun. Takes him a while to get it right.
So now that we've picked out,
So right there, he's about to get it right. So I'll mark my end point, pressing the letter I,
so now that we've picked out,
and I'm going to jump to the end,
cut,
back up just a little bit, mark my out point, and again, I'm going to click it and drag it onto the timeline just to the right of the first 2 clips I've already edited. Okay, now I have 3 clips in a row I'm beginning to edit. Let's take a pause and look more closely at the timeline now. Across the top of the timeline, you'll see there are a series of commonly used buttons and tools. We will explore these as the class moves forward, but for now, just realize that they are there. In the top left-hand corner of the timeline is this icon that's called View Options, Timeline View Options. I'm going to open that up and change how my timeline looks just a little bit. So we've got basically 3 sets of options and then a couple of sliders. So this first set of options changes the overall appearance of the timeline. So this first icon, as I turn it on and off, is opening a little bit of space at the top of the timeline. Right now that doesn't do me any good, but if I were to have more than one timeline active, that might be handy. For now, I'm going to leave that off. The second one really doesn't have any appearance change at the moment. We'll get a little bit into that further in the semester. This third one turns on and off the audio waveforms in the audio tracks. I like seeing my audio waveforms, so I'm going to leave those turned on. Let's look at this second row, video view options. Right now, the first option is selected, which means my icons, my video clips look like film strips. They're just a series of thumbnail images. I don't like that. I find it busy and distracting and hard to look at. This is the default view, but if I change to this second view, you'll notice now that my film strips, you'll notice now that my video clips only have a thumbnail at the beginning and the end of each clip, and the middle is just a blue strip. If I go to the third option, it gets rid of thumbnails altogether, and it gets rid of the audio waveforms as well. I like seeing a few thumbnails, so I'm going to go back to that second view. And again, I like having my audio waveform turned on, so I'll turn that back on in this upper row. This third row controls what the audio waveform looks like. So this first one toggles back and forth between two very subtly different options, right? I'm not sure what rectification means in this particular case, but I can look at the waveform as rectified or non-rectified. All it really seems to do is move it up or down in that audio track. The second one changes whether I'm looking at the half of a waveform on the bottom of the track or the entire waveform centered in the track. I actually find this view a little bit easier to work with. And this third one, this is subtle, but it's actually turning on and off an outline around the audio waveforms. I usually work without that. Now these bottom two, track height for video and audio, this allows me to make my video track larger or smaller, and my audio tracks larger or smaller. And as I start running out of space on the screen, there might be reason to play around with those. So that's what this button in the top left-hand corner of the timeline does. It allows you to configure what your edited timeline looks like. Running out of space can be a real problem on a small screen, so you need to be aware that you can rearrange this to some degree. If I put my mouse up here just above the top of the timeline, you see that it changes into a little stretchy icon. So I can actually move this up or down, and by moving it up or down, I can give more space to the timeline, but I'm taking space away from my media pool, my preview window, and my program window. Likewise, I can go the other direction if I want more space on the viewers or more space for other things. This also works in a side-to-side fashion with some windows, so I can make my media pool wider by making the preview and program windows smaller to a certain limit, or I can make the preview and program windows larger and the media pool smaller, again within a certain limit. If you get confused, you can always reset this to the default. Go into the Workspace menu, select Reset UI Layout, and it will take it back to the standard default view for whatever page you're on, in this case the edit page. Now again, I don't have very many clips over here, so I'm going to shorten my media pool, and that icon is in the very top left-hand corner of the screen here. I'm going to turn off the bin list, and everything else looks just about fine. Now notice, once I added that third clip, my video clips are now wider than my timeline. I can't see the entire timeline at once. And now that I've done some zooming with these audio and video clips, it's even gotten worse. So here's my first clip, there's stand up 1. Here's my second clip, there's stand up 2. I can't see all of that, and I can't see stand up 3 at all. So I've got a couple of things I can do here. At the bottom of the screen there is a scroll bar, so I can scroll to find. I can also zoom in and zoom out on the timeline, and there's a couple of ways I can do that. This fader here with the plus and minus zooms in and out. So if I zoom to the left or drag to the left, right, I'm zooming out. And likewise, I can do the right. You can do this also by clicking on the little plus button to zoom in and the little minus button to zoom out. Or you can use the keyboard, Command plus on a Mac or Control plus on a PC zooms in, Command minus or Control minus zooms out. There are three presets up here that you could use. This is custom zoom. Because I've been zooming in and out, it's gone to that one. The second one is called detail zoom. It just zooms in pretty far and stays there. This third one is called full extent zoom. It zooms all the way out. No matter how much video and audio you have on your timeline, it will zoom out so that everything fits. There's a keystroke to do this, and that is Shift Z. So normally when I'm editing, I zoom in and out constantly, just depending on what I'm doing at the moment. Right now I need to be zoomed out so I can see where to put my fourth clip. But sometimes when I'm trying to do fine work, maybe I'm placing a piece of B-roll or maybe I'm trimming, I need to zoom in to have more detail look. Let me go ahead and put a couple more clips on here, and then we will move on to trimming. So here we go with our fourth stand-up clip.
And action. Now that our red line.
All right, so I'm going to mark my endpoint right here between where he says action and now that.
Now that our beans are ground, let's take a look at these.
I'm also going to go to the end and find my out point.
And cut.
All right, it looks like he's staring at the machine there for quite a while. I'm going to try to find the last thing that he said.
Spigot here, and we're ready to go.
All right, now that he's turned the machine on, I'm going to go ahead and mark my out point there. And just like before, I'm just going to click and drag this down onto the timeline and place it next to the previous clips. It's starting to get a little bit too wide, so I'm going to hit Shift Z to zoom out so I can see everything. All right, so go ahead and take some time, finish this out, work your way through all 7 of these stand-up clips, mark an in point, mark an out point, put them on the timeline in order. In the next video, we're going to look at how to manipulate things once they're already on the timeline, and we're going to talk about trimming things that are already on the timeline.